जी, इनफैक्ट राकेश गुप्ता जी को कोई परिचय नहीं चाहिए. नेशन वाइड, कंट्री वाइड इज ए नोन पर्सनैलिटी. टेक्स्ट में उनका एक अपना नाम है, अपना एक रेपुटेशन और गुडविल है. Still, I would like to formally introduce Rakesh Gupta ji before this August virtual gathering. Rakesh Gupta ji is a CA, he is CS, he has also done ICWA, he is a MBA, and he is also LLB, LLM, PhD. So, lot many degrees in his fold, and very illustrious academic career is having. Rakesh ji was appointed as member in the Income Tax Tribunal when he was just 37 years old, and he was posted at Hyderabad, but he resigned later on after joining. He resigned from the post of the member as ITAT. Rakesh ji has co-authored 2 books. Both the books have been written on very on the subjects which requires a lot of deliberation and which quite often haunts every tax professional. So he has written 2 books. One is on search and seizure and assessment of such cases, and another is on taxation of real estate developers and joint development agreements. Rakesh ji is practicing as advocate. He is regularly appearing before ITAT, High Courts and Supreme Courts. And lot many people like me knows he has argued very high profile cases of lot many politicians and other stalwart personalities of the country. And he has also participated in United Nations Committee of Experts on International Cooperation in Tax Matters, which was held at UN headquarters in New York. And he has also participated in European Union headquarters in Geneva in October 2018. Rakesh ji is member of International Association of Tax Judges, and he has participated in meeting held at Finland and at Cambridge, UK. He has also been invited to address Chamber of Commerce and Industry on Finance Bill at Abu Dhabi and Bahrain. So this is a very small kind of introduction about Rakesh ji. Many things are there to be told about him. But with these words only, Rakesh ji, most respectfully and most lovingly, I now invite you to address all of us on a subject which is in fact supposed to be covered by only 3 sections, 11, 12, 13. But if we go by the final aspects, then the issues become endless. So far as the donations are concerned, the registrations are concerned, allowability, disallowability, many things which we come across when we talk about the taxability of charitable institutions, trust, education societies. So with these words, Rakesh ji, I invite you to kindly deliberate on your topic. Rakesh ji, please.
Thank you, Manoj ji, for such nice and kind words having been used for me, to many of which I may not truly deserve, but then anything good is spoken for somebody, is bound to be received with both of the hands. Thank you, thank you. Very respected senior members of the profession, my contemporary members, my junior professional friends, and each one of you who is here. To come to Indore has always been a great pleasure for me. Many of you may be knowing, because to go to Sarafa itself is a very big charm for a foodie like me. But that because of this corona, I have not been able to make it. But anyway, sooner the things will improve, and then I will make it a point to be with all of you. The topic of charitable trust and institutions, as Manoj has spoken, that there are 3 sections. Yes, ideally there are 3 sections, 11, 12 and 13. But then we have got section 2, subsection 24, which defines income in that clause 2A. Then we have got section 2, subsection 15 with its proviso. Then we have got section 10, section 10, subsection 23C. Then of course 11, 12, 13. Then we have got section 115 BBC on the anonymous donations. Then we have got section on section of accredited income 115 TD. And then about the taxability in what manner, that we have got section 164 subsection 2. So though still the sections are not many, but taxability aspects of the charitable trust and institutions have always posed a challenge. And the challenge is partially because of this reason, that when you go in for claiming the taxation exemptions from the tax department, that itself is a very big thing. Then the department will be highly proactive. Not only be proactive, it will be aggressive at times. And when the department becomes aggressive, and that too with this mindset that those who are the charitable trust and organized trusts and institutions, they are only facade, they are only camouflage, and they are not doing in real sense the charitable activity. That kind of mindset now gives a very strong sense of anguish. So these sections, now you will have to traverse almost the entire Income Tax Act. The things are not placed at one place. Some things are there at some place, then there is one proviso, other is in explanation, other is in subsection, and so on and so forth. And that is how, I mean, the taxability aspect of charitable trust and institution. Now, all these things make it a very complex. And then we have got two sections of exemptions, 1112 and then 1023C. And earlier, until this Finance Act 2020, now a trust or institutions could have acted like a ping pong game, availed exemptions under one section in 1 year, have gone in for the second year for some other section on 1023C. So all these things posed challenges in the matter of the taxability of the charitable trust and institutions. But Finance Act 2020 has introduced the two provisos to section 11.7, 11 subsection 7, to say that if you are registered under section 12AA and you are registered or you are approved under section 1023C or you are notified under section 1046, then your registration under section 12AA, that will become inoperative. And in case you want to reclaim that inoperativeness to operative one, then you will have to reapply for it. And then 1023C now will be discontinued, and then you will continue to avail the benefit of section 12AA, now 12AB registrations. So this amendment is there under section 11.7 by way of insertion of two provisos. So normally there are three forms of organizations: trusts, which are registered under Trusts Act, then they have to get themselves registered or approved under section 12AA or under section 1023C. Societies, they have to be incorporated in the Societies Registration Act, then they have to go in for either under 12AA, now under 12AB or 1023C, or another form of organizations can be in the form of section 8 company, incorporated under the Companies Act, and then they could have gone in for 12AA, now under 12AB or under section 1023C. Now, these forms of organizations, in order to be called charitable organization, and that too for the purpose of Income Tax Act, will have to pursue any one or more charitable activities. And those charitable purposes has been mentioned under section 2 subsection 15 of the Income Tax Act. Relief of the poor, education, yoga, medical relief, preservation of the forest, preservation of the watersheds, preservation of the wildlife, preservation of the monuments of public and historical interest. And then the residuary clauses, advancement of any other object of general public utility. Now this residuary clause now has been the bone of contention because of the proviso which has been appended from 2009. And that proviso says that advancement of any other object of general public utility will not be treated as charitable activity if it involves carrying on any trade, commerce or business, or rendering any service in relation to any trade, commerce or business, either for a fee or a cess or for consideration, irrespective of its nature of use or application. So advancement of any other object of general public utility, if it involves trade, commerce or business, then benefit of exemption now will not be allowed, as has been mentioned in section 13, or benefit of section 11 and 12 will not be allowed, as has been mentioned under section 13 subsection 8. But then there is threshold limit. There is one exception which has been provided in the proviso itself, that in case those charitable organizations are pursuing advancement of any other object of general public utility and are carrying on such activity which are in the nature of trade, commerce or business, then if total receipts from such trade, commerce or business does not exceed 20% of the total receipt, then it will be all right. It will continue to enjoy the benefit of section 11 and 12. These charitable organizations normally are not permitted to carry on business except in two circumstances, which I will come little later under section 11.4 and 11.4 capital A. Now, as I said, that if these organizations, which are the charitable organizations pursuing charitable objectives, now have to avail the benefit of exemption, then those exemptions provisions are there under section 11 and 12, subject to the fulfillment of conditions of section 12A, 12AA, earlier now 12AB. And in case they want to go in for section 1023C, then section 1023C is the section whereunder if they get themselves approved, then they can enjoy the benefit of exemption. But under section 1023C, there are educational institutions which exist solely for education, or those organizations running the medical institutions for philanthropic purposes, either financed by the government or substantially financed by the government, then irrespective of the quantum of receipts, their income is exempt. But then if you are not financed by the government, or you are not substantially financed by the government, and if your annual receipts do not exceed ₹1 crore, then also your entire income would be exempt. But then if you cross the threshold of 1 crore of rupees in a year, then you will have to go in for the approval under section 1023C from the competent authority. So the benefit of exemption under section 11 and 12, and for that matter, those organizations which are approved under section 1023C, they are almost identical. But then there are certain differences between these two registrations, or between the SSCs who are registered under 12AB now, 12AA earlier, and section 1023C approved. So what are the difference? That in case of the charitable trusts and organizations, they have to apply in form number 10A for seeking registration, whereas in case of approval under section 1023C, they have to go in for filing form number 56D. In case of charitable organizations who are seeking registration under section 12 now AB, earlier 12AA, then audit report they had to submit, and audit report they had to submit, that has to be submitted in form number 10B. But in case of institutions or trusts to be approved under section 1023C, they have to submit their report in form number 10BB. In case of the corpus donations, now this position has been made equal in both types of organizations by Finance Act 2020. But then prior to that, in case of those charitable trusts and institutions who were registered under section 12AA, the corpus donations need not to have been applied. But in case of those organizations who were approved under section 1023C, this kind of privilege of not utilization of corpus donation was not available with those trusts. Then in case of 12AA registered charitable institutions and trusts, they could have deferred the application in certain situations in case that income has not been received or for any other reason. Whereas this kind of deferment of application, which is called technically as a deemed application, now this was not, and this is not applicable in case of 1023C approved organization. Then in case of the assessing officer's power while making assessment of 12AA registered organizations, now the assessing officer himself finding the infirmities, finding the violation of section 13, then can make the benefit of section 11 and 12 unavailable to the trust or institution. Whereas under section 1023C, the assessing officer will have to make reference to that competent authority, bringing out the instances of those violations, and then depending upon the edict, depending upon the order issued by that authority, then the assessing officer would have to take the call during the course of assessment proceeding. And as I said, that Finance Act 2020 has added proviso to section 11 subsection 7 to say that now either you will continue to enjoy the benefit of section 12AA or under section 12AB in case you are registered under 12AA as well as under section 1023C also. Now, once you are a charitable institutions, when you are a charitable or religious trusts or institutions who are registered under section 12AA, now under 12AB, or approved under section 1023C, provisions of exemptions except those differences which I have spoken are almost identical. Therefore, we would discuss about the taxability of charitable trusts and institutions who are registered under section 12AA. Section 11 subsection 1 says that income from the property held under trust would not be included in the total income of the trust if that income is applied for charitable purposes in India to the extent of 85%. So quantum is 85% of income. Now 85% of the gross income or the net income, there used to be controversy on it. Form which has been devised and notified by the board very recently. Now that gives a very strong indication that 85% of the gross receipts will have to be applied, and therefore to that extent that controversy seems to have been put under the carpet, because the board's stand earlier used to be, the department stands earlier used to be that 85% of the income, net income, ought to be used for application. There used to be quite good number of litigations on this aspect. The second nature of income, second category of income is the voluntary contributions, because section 12 subsection 1 says that the voluntary contributions received from the members which are not in the nature of corpus donations would also qualify to be income for the purpose of section 11(1). So even voluntary contributions which are not corpus donations, that will also constitute income for the purpose of section 11. That means that even those voluntary contributions also will have to be applied for charitable purposes in India to the extent of 85%. The third category of income is voluntary contributions which are given by the person with a clear stipulation that these contributions shall form part of the corpus of the trust. So when there is such a specific direction from the donor or contributor, these are called corpus donations, and these are the income which are not under section 11(1)(a), b, c, but it is income under section 11 subsection 1 clause d. And income referred in section 11(1)(d) need not be applied, meaning thereby the corpus donations need not be applied for the charitable purpose to the extent of 80%, 85%. So that can be kept because they are the corpus. They can be kept in the designated amount of modes of investment. Then business income can also constitute income. Business income, though the charitable trust cannot carry on business unless that business is incidental to the attainment of the main object of the trust, or if some business undertaking has been donated to the trust by somebody, then in that situation the business income coming from that undertaking or business which is incidental to the attainment of the main object of the charitable trust and institution, they will also income, and then they will also have to be applied to the extent of 85% under section 11. Then there is anonymous donation. Section 115 BBC is section which provides for the taxability at a particular percentage. But then there is section 11 subsection 6 was added by Finance Act 2014 with effect from assessment year 15-16 to say that if any asset is considered as an application, then depreciation for such asset will not be allowed while computing the income, which income is to be applied later on to the extra 85. Now earlier the department stand used to be that you cannot take advantage for the application of the capital asset, at the same time claim depreciation while computing the income. Kerala High Court in Lissi Hospital, Lissi Medical, Kerala High Court was by the side of the department, but whereas now the Supreme Court came, Gujarati Rajasthani Samaj, but then the legislature, in order to give quietus to this controversy, though it was settled by the Supreme Court, now has made its intention very clear that we will not allow you the benefit under two provisions, and therefore depreciation will not be considered for the purpose of computing income in a case where the asset on which the depreciation is claimed has itself been treated as application of income. But then where that asset has not been treated as an application, then the depreciation can be claimed while computing the income. So these are the income of the trust which have to be applied at least to the extent of 85%. And in case 85% is applied, then such incomes would not be forming part of the total income of the previous year of the person in receipt of such income. Then comes application of income, because we have seen the income. Now application of income, as I said, 85% of the gross income, then 85% be applied or accumulated for charitable purpose in India. 85% be applied, or there is a provision of accumulation also in case there is a shortfall from 85%, to which I will come little later. Capital expenditure or the fixed assets purchased and to be held only for the charitable or religious purposes. Now, even such assets would be treated as application of income. But then if these assets have been acquired out of the borrowed funds, then to the extent of borrowed funds, these assets will not be treated as application. Whatever my own money, whatever the money of the trust, which is not borrowed fund, is used for the purpose of acquisition of that or meeting of that capital expenditure, that alone will be treated as application. But then if borrowed funds have come to be repaid later on along with the interest, now that will be treated as repayment as and when it is repaid. Now, if you are a trust and pursuant to the objects which you are pursuing and chasing, now if you advance loan during the course of you carrying the charitable activity, then the loan given by you, that will be treated as application. But then when the loan comes back to you, that will constitute income. Then section 11 subsection 7 was added by Finance Act 2014. Subsection 6 and 7 was added by Finance Act 2014. Subsection 6 was in connection with depreciation on the asset, and that asset having been treated as application. Now subsection 7 was also added by Finance Act 2014 to provide from 1/4/2015 to say that if you are registered under section 12AA or under old provision of section 12A, and if you are having any other income which is also exempt under section 10, then that income also is required to be applied by you. Now you cannot enjoy the exemption under both sections, under section 11 as well as under section 10. So section 11 was modified by gifting subsection 7 by the Finance Act 2014 to say that if there are incomes which are exempt under section 10, then except the agricultural income which is covered under subsection 1 of section 10, or income which is covered under section 1023C, it will also be used for the purpose of application. As I said, corpus donations not to be applied for the purpose of section 11.1 because corpus donations are there under section 11.1D. Then explanation 3 was added to section 11.1 to say, and it was added by Finance Act 2018 from 1/4/2019, that any amount which is disallowable under section 40AIA or under section 40A3 while computing the income under the head business or profession. Now those types of disallowances which are made in a case where a person is pursuing the business or profession, and if the trust having not deducted the tax at source or having deducted the tax at source has not made it over to the government treasury on or before the due date of filing of return, or incurring some revenue expenditure, the payment in respect of which has been made exceeding rupees 10,000 in cash to a person in a day, then these kind of amounts are not allowed in case of a person who is carrying on business or profession and when his income is computed under the head business profession. So this fiction was created in case of charitable trust and institutions by inserting explanation 3 to section 11(1) to say that these amounts of disalliances or these amounts of the nature which are referred under section 40I or 40A3 will not be treated as application. So if you have got some amount which would have been disallowable under section 40IA or under section 40A3, your application will be curtailed by these amounts. Then explanation 2 is also there under section 11(1), now which says that out of the current year's income, you can make donations to any other trust also is registered under section 12AA, but it should not be donations towards the corpus of the trust. So out of the current year's income, if you are giving donations to other trusts, not in the form of corpus donations, then that will be treated as application. But then if you have given donations of the corpus donation to other trusts, then that will not be treated as application. So we have seen the income, then we have seen the applications, do's and don'ts. Now there is a case of deemed application. Now in case of trust, at times it happens that incomes are not received. So when the incomes are not received, obviously such unreceived income is incapable of being applied. Or there may be a situation where the income is received at the fag end, or maybe even during the year itself, but then you could not apply it by the end of the previous year. For both the situations, now under explanation 1, sub explanation 2 to section 11(1), now an option has been given, and that option will have to be exercised by the trust by filing form number 9 capital A electronically, because it says that in the prescribed form, in the prescribed manner. Now earlier there was no prescribed form, there was no prescribed manner, and therefore even in that situation, the information or intimation given to the assessing officer, that option exercised before the assessing officer till the completion of the assessment, then this option used to be treated as having been exercised by the charitable trust and institution, and therefore now this option has to be exercised by filing form number 9 capital A through electronic mechanism, and to be furnished on or before the due date of filing of return under section 139(1), that this much of income which has not been received, I will utilize it in the year of receipt or in the year following to the year of receipt, or in any other case in the following year I will utilize it. And if you exercise this option, complying with these timeline and complying this prescribed manner and prescribed form, then in that situation, the amount with reference to which you have exercised your option, that will be treated as deemed application. And therefore you are required, you will be obliged to apply such income in the year of receipt or in the following year, or if you have not been able to apply it for any other reason, then you can apply it in the following year. Following year means the year which is following then the year in which the income was derived. So this is called deemed application. Then we have got capital gains. So if you means the charitable trust and institutions are holding capital assets under trust meant for the charitable purpose, of course, and the capital gain arising on the transfer as a capital asset. Now you are required to apply the net consideration, and in case you are able to apply the net considerations for the purpose of acquisition of any other capital asset, then if you have wholly utilized that net considerations, then whole of the capital gain will be treated as applied. But then if you have not utilized the net considerations wholly, then on proportionate basis the capital gain will be treated as applied, and the balance capital gain now will be income under section 11(1), and then whether you want to exercise option or you want to go in for accumulation under section 11(2), now that will be for you, or you have to apply 85% of such remaining capital gain in such a situation. So the choice is yours. The board has come out with a circular, though it's very old circular, that if you invest this net considerations in the fixed deposit also of a scheduled bank, then that will also be treated as utilization of applications for the purpose of the capital asset. So that is a provision which has been made by the board by issuing a circular. Now, in case you have made excessive application in year one, now whether you can claim or you can carry forward that excessive applications to be set off against the following, against the income of the following year. Now, there is no explicit provision, or for that matter, even the implicit provision under the law, but the court, the latest decision which has come from the Supreme Court in Subros Educational Society's case, that it can be done. But Form 7, now which has been notified, doesn't admit this kind of the set-off. So there is a practical problem. But insofar as the law is concerned, the law has been settled finally by the Supreme Court that excessive application of 1 year is liable to be carried forward to be set off in the following year. Now, we discussed about the deemed application under section 11(1), where you were required to exercise your option. But then this amount having been treated as deemed application, but then you have failed to apply that amount in the year of receipt or in the following year. Then in that situation, section 11, subsection 1, capital B, now it says that such unutilized amount, unapplied amount, which has been claimed by you as deemed application, now will be treated as taxable. Now it will be treated as taxable in which year? So in first instance, when you could not apply because you did not receive it, it will be treated as income of the following year. Following year, which following year? The year succeeding to the year in which that amount was recovered or received by you. But when you went in for deemed application in some other case, not on the basis of the non-receipt of income, then it will be treated as income of the following year, following the year in which this income was derived. That is what section 1, subsection 1b to section 11 says. Now we have got section 11(2), and section 11(2) says that where the application of income falls short of 85% of your income, then you can go in for the accumulation of that income for some specific project. Of course, that project has to be the charitable or religious project, that depending upon the nature of. So section 11(2), you can accumulate if there is a shortfall from 85% of income. But then there are very onerous conditions, and those onerous conditions will have to be borne, because if there is a violation of those conditions, or you have not been able to meet the timeline, you have not gone for accumulation by observing those do's and don'ts, then there will be serious prejudice to your case. So what are those conditions? The first condition is that you are required to file the statement of accumulation in form number 10, and that form number 10 will have to be uploaded electronically, and that too on or before the due date of filing of return under section 139(1). So if the statement is not filed, that too in form number 10, and that too not before the due date of filing or return under 139(1), then you are out. Your accumulation will not be permitted. Earlier, there were decisions of the court which used to say that you could have given this intimations to the assessing officer even up to the closure of your assessment. But this kind of a problem has come. Initially, the board has delegated this power to condone the delay to the commissioner. But now, no delegation of no delegation of power to condone now has been given to anybody. In case some delay has happened, you'll have to approach to the CBDT under section 119, and then board may or may not accept, depending upon the facts of your case, the reasons which you set out as to what has led to this delay in filing. And in case the board passes an order against you, then you have the recourse only to go to the High Court by way of a writ. Then the second condition is that in the statement, then you'll have to show the purpose. You'll have to detail the purpose, that for what you are seeking this accumulation, what you want to do with this accumulation, and then you'll have to specify the period of accumulation, and that period cannot be more than 5 years. And then this amount of accumulated funds will have to be kept in the form or modes which are there under section 11 subsection 5. And then there is one disability that you cannot give any donations to any other trust, even if registered under section 12AA or 1023C, may not be corpus donation out of this accumulated. In case of the current year's income, you could have given normal donations, not corpus donation, but normal donation. But out of the accumulated funds, you cannot give any donations to any other trust. But if you do, then there are consequences which are there under section 11.3. So you have gone in for accumulation. Let us assume that you have complied with all these 4 or 5 conditions we just mentioned, but then later on some default takes place. So if the default takes place, so let us see what kind of default has been envisaged under section 11 subsection 3. And if those defaults take place, then the amount which you accumulated now will become taxable. Now in which year it will become taxable, the response and the reply has been given under section 11 subsection 3. So the first situation which has been envisaged where the default can happen, that it has been applied for purposes other than the charitable or religious purposes aforesaid. So if you have applied but not for the charitable or religious purposes, so if there is a misutilization, then you have violated the condition of section 11.2. Or such accumulated fund ceases to remain accumulated for that purpose. That also now will give handle under section 11.3 to the assessing officer, to bring it to tax. Or the funds which were required to remain invested in the forms and modes of section 11.5, they cease to remain invested. Then also the violation takes place. If these funds have not been utilized for the purpose for which, or not utilized or utilized fully within 5 years or a year following. In this case, a year following has also been given. And the last condition is that if the donation has been given to any other trust in violation of the condition of section 11.2, because there is a complete prohibition that you cannot give any donations to any other trust out of the accumulated funds. So if you have given, you means charitable trust and institutions have given, then there is a violation of section 11.2 and then the amount will become taxable. So when the amount will become taxable, it will become taxable in the year when the period of 5 years expires. But in case when you have not been able to utilize it, either in the year or either within the accumulated period or a year thereafter, then in the 6th year, in that situation alone, the 6th year will be the year in which that amount which has not been utilized will come to be taxed. And if the form number 10 has not been filed in time or return has not been filed in time, section 13 subsection 9 has been added by Finance Act 2015, which says that in that situation also that accumulated funds under section 11.2 now will not be allowed as a reduction of your income. So these are the 4 or 5 situations. Now the violation when happens, then that will bring that accumulated income which was initially claimed as exempt or excludable from a total income. Now that exemption, that privilege will have to be foregone. That is what section 11.3 says. Now whether the trust can carry on the business. There are 2 situations when the trust can carry on the business. One is envisaged under subsection 4 of section 11. Section 11 subsection 4 says that the undertaking, that business undertaking, if donated by somebody else, now will be part of the asset, will be part of property held under trust. So any business undertaking which the trust gets by way of donation from somebody would be part of the property held under trust. That is what subsection 4 says. And when the income of that undertaking has to be computed, then the income shown in the books of that undertaking and the income computed by the assessing officer, if there is a difference, then income to the extent of difference, section 11.4 says, will not be treated to have been applied for charitable or religious purposes. In that situation, that will form part of income on which the trust will have to pay tax. The second situation is, normally the trust cannot carry on business. Yes, one instance was where somebody donates the business undertaking to the trust. In that situation, obviously, the trust will have to do that business. But apart from this, the trust is not permitted to do business except in one situation, when that business is incidental to the attainment of the trust's objectives, charitable objectives. In that situation, the trust can carry on the business, provided the separate books of accounts are maintained. And then in that situation also, this business income now will be treated as income for the purpose, will have to be applied to the extent of 85%. But then, if that charitable trust is pursuing advancement of any other object of general public utility, then also it can carry on business, trade or commerce. The condition is that the receipts from the trade, commerce or business should not exceed more than 20% of the total receipts. But then if it exceeds more than 20%, then you cross the threshold, you violate the threshold which is there under the proviso to section 215. Then section 13 subsection 8 says that the benefit of section 11 and 12 will not be allowed for that year. Earlier, the SSCs used to argue, since I am still registered under section 12AA, therefore I am entitled to claim the benefit of exemption under section 11 and 12. So the courts have, when the court said yes, then the legislature brought an amendment by way of section 13 subsection 8 to say that in such a situation, you need not to cancel the registration. The benefit of section 11 and 12 in respect of the entire income of the trust will not be allowed. And that is what has been provided under section 13. So if the trust is carrying on the business in these circumstances and its turnover exceeds rupees 1 crore threshold as prescribed in section 44AB, then the trust will have to get its accounts audited even under section 44AB of the Income Tax Act. Now we discussed about briefly in the context of section 11.2 the forms and modes of investment, because the accumulated funds under section 11.2, one of the condition was that it has to be kept in the form or mode prescribed under section 11.5. But the trust funds are required to be kept only in the forms and modes which are prescribed under section 11.5, and there is a long list and you cannot remember. Broadly, the deposit in the scheduled bank, government securities, and the immovable property. So if the trust funds are invested in the immovable property held for charitable or religious purpose, then is all right. Funds deposited in the bank account of the scheduled bank, this is one of the form or mode of investment which is there under section 11.5. But if the donations are received by the trust in kind, then that donation may be in the form which is recognized under section 11.5, like the immovable property. So suppose कोई donation में किसी ने plot दे दिया. So since a trust's property or trust's assets can be held under section 11.5 in the form of immovable property also, therefore this donation itself is in that very form which is contemplated under section 11.5. If the donation is of some other asset, which asset can be applied for the charitable purpose. Suppose you are a religious organization, you are a religious trust. Now some jewelry is received by you in kind, and that jewelry, in case on jewelry is applied in the form of chadhawa to the deity, then that application is there. But then if there is some other donation received in kind which is not in the form or mode prescribed under section 11.5, or which by itself cannot be applied for charitable or religious purposes, then there is a mandate which has to be followed unreservedly by these charitable institutions to convert it into form or mode which is there under section 11.5, and there is a time limit. The time limit is on or before the expiry of 1 year time limit from the end of the previous year if the donation was received. So it has to be converted in the form or manner, because in case at any point of time the funds of the trusts are not found to have invested in the forms and modes of section 11.5, then section 13 subsection 1 clause D says that the benefit of section 11 and 12 will not be allowed to you. And now the provision has been made under section 12AB that it can be the ground for the commissioner to cancel your registration. Therefore, you have to ensure that the trust funds remain invested. Then we discussed about the corpus donations. Corpus donations which are given by the donor with a specific direction that they shall form part of the corpus of the trust. Only such donations, and which should be in the nature of voluntary contributions. If they are not in the voluntary contributions, but they are perforce contributions, then they will not be corpus donations. So the direction has to be from the donor. They have to be in the nature of voluntary contributions. Assessing officers at times, I have seen in several litigated manners, the assessors claim that these are the donations which are corpus donations. Assessing officers, where is the direction? He asks where is the direction, where the donors have given the direction. The SSC trust says, sir, we have got the pre-printed receipts. When the donation is given and we issue the receipt, and that receipt mentions that we have received this as corpus donation, therefore it should be taken as sufficient compliance. The courts have said no, the direction has to be from the donor. This discretion should not be vested with the trust to treat some donations as corpus or some donations otherwise than corpus. No. So the direction has to be from the donor. Therefore, there must be adequate documentations to that effect. Suppose if it is printed on the receipt itself, then you must get an endorsement by your signature from the donor on the receipt itself. Then the income of the trust is liable to be taxed under section 164(2). So what kind of income? And when section 164(2) income is concerned, then these incomes will be taxed as if this income belongs to AOP, meaning thereby that all those basic exemption limit and the benefit of slab that will be allowed. So which are that income? Income derived from the property held under trust, section 11(1). Income of the nature mentioned in section 224(2), meaning thereby voluntary contributions. That will, voluntary contributions which are not corpus, they will be treated as income on which the tax rate will be applicable as per section 164 subsection 2. Income from the business under section 11(4)(a), that will also suffer the tax as per, and which are not exempt under section 11. If you have not utilized them, you have not applied them to the extent 85%. Now that will be, or there is no deemed application or accumulation under section 11(2). Now that income will be treated as income of AOP, liable to be taxed under section 164 subsection 2. But then if there is some income which is not exempt because of the operation of section 13(1)(c) and 13(1)(d), then such incomes would have to be taxed at maximum marginal rate. Then comes the anonymous donations. So charitable and religious organizations receive anonymous donations. When anonymous donations are received by the religious trust or by charitable and religious trust, any trust which is religious as well as charitable, then anonymous donations received by these two categories of trusts are not hit by section 115 BBC. Those anonymous donations will receive the same treatment which any other income receives. But in case you are a charitable organization receiving the anonymous donation, then such anonymous donation has to suffer the tax rate of 30%. 30% anonymous donation in excess of rupees 1 lakh or 5%, whichever is higher. What is anonymous donation? Anonymous donation where the name, address or PAN number is not given. Now, name, address and PAN number. But then these should be capable of being verified in case the verification is called for by the assessing officer during the course of assessment. So in case of charitable organizations, anonymous donations now have to suffer the tax rate which are there under section 115 BBC. If you are religious trust, then any amount of anonymous donation now would not go in for the tax rate under section 115 BBC. If you are partly religious, partly charitable, then also anonymous donations are not to be taxed. But then if you are running educational institution or medical institution, and this anonymous donation is with a specific direction to the medical institution or educational institution, then such anonymous donation would have to suffer the tax under section 115 BBC. But of course, these anonymous donations, even if you may have paid tax of 30%, but then they have to be kept in the form or modes of investment which are prescribed under section 11.5. Section 12, subsection 2. Now it says the income from contributions. Now subsection 1, I have already discussed that all contributions not with a specific direction that they shall form part of corpus will be treated as income for the purposes 11. 11 subsection 2 says that if you are a charitable or religious trusts having educational institution or medical institution, whereby you have rendered educational or medical assistance or services to the related parties, those related which are mentioned under section 13 subsection 3, then the value of such services will be treated as taxable in your hand. That is what section 11 subsection 2 says. Then who are the persons under section 13.3? These are the persons who is the author of the trust or the founder of the institution. Or if you are a person who has made total contributions till the relevant previous year exceeding rupees 50,000, then also you are a person who is mentioned under section 13.3. If all these persons is a Hindu, if the founder or the author or such person is Hindu undivided family, then all the members of that Hindu undivided family now will be persons under section 13.3. If you are a trustee of the trust or manager, or if you are relative has been defined under explanation 1 to section 13. If you are relative to all these persons, then also you are 13.3 persons. If you are a concern in which you hold more than 20% stake or 20% profit sharing ratio, then also all such concerns are 13.3%. So if while running that educational institution or medical institution, you being charitable, wholly charitable and religious trust have extended some benefit on account of education, concessional or free, to these 13.3 related persons, then such value of the services which you have given will be treated as income which is liable to be taxed. Then we have got the disabilities under section 13. Section 13 is a very, very dangerous section. Section 13 subsection 1, it has got as many as 9 subsections. Subsection 1 has got 4 clauses. Now which says that if you are a charitable or religious trust, but then if income from the property is from the private religious purposes and which does not inure the benefit to the public. So income from the property held under such a trust which is for a private religious purposes and which does not inure the benefit to the public at large, that income from the property, such property will not be allowed as exempt under section 11 and 12. The benefit of, because section 13 has been worded in such a manner, though the courts have given the restrictive meaning, but the section 13, nothing contained in section 11 and 12 shall operate to exclude such income from being part of total income. If you are a trust holding the property for private religious purpose which does not inure the benefit for the general public, or if you are a trust created for any particular religious community or caste, then also the whole of your income now has not to be allowed as exemption under section 11 and 12. Now if you are a trust which has been created after the commencement of this act and your income inures the benefit to 13.3 related persons, or any part of your income or property has been used at any time during the previous year directly or indirectly for the benefit of these 13.3 related persons, then also benefit of section 11 and 12 in respect of all income will not be allowed. And section 13(1)(d) says that if at any time during the previous year your funds which were required to have remained in the form or mode section 11.5 have not remained invested in the modes or form of 11.5, then also the benefit of section 11 and 12 in respect of your entire income. Though there are certain decisions which say that not the whole of the income, but the wording of section 13, and those decisions have not come from the highest court of the land, and therefore, I mean, we'll have to very cautiously apply those decisions. Then we have got section 13 subsection 2, and which says that in case you are receiving services from these 13.3 related persons, or you are extending any benefit to these persons, 13.3 related persons, but then if these transactions are taking place at arm's length, as if these transactions are taking place between two strangers, then it's all right. So you as the tax auditors or you as the auditors will have to take a call whether these transactions which are taking place between you and those 13.3 related persons, whether on account of salary, whether on account of interest, whether on account of user of the property for them, whether it is taking place at arm's length or not. And in case it is found by the assessing officer that it is not at arm's length, then there is a problem. It says that benefit of section 11 and 12 would not be allowed. As I said, section 13 subsection 8, it says that if there is a proviso to section 215 now which hits you, then the benefit of section 11 and 12 now will not be allowed to you for that year. And then 13.9, if form number 10 is not filed in time, or if you have not filed your return of income in time, then also there is the benefit of section 11 and 12 will not be allowed. Now there are two more provisions which I have omitted under section 12A, which are the conditions for the availability of the exemption under section 11 and 12, is that if the total income of the trust, charitable trust or religious institution, after disregarding the provisions of section 11.12 is more than the basic exemption limit, then it has to get its accounts audited. And now as per Finance Act 2020 has to furnish it on or before the due date of filing of return along with the return of income. And if there is a failure, then the benefit of section 11.12 will not be allowed. Then we have got section 11 subsection 1 clause BA, which says that the return of income is required to be filed by the charitable institutions or religious institutions on or before the due date which are there under section 139 subsection 4 capital B. Then there is subsection 2 also, that since when this benefit of section 11 and 12 will be available in case you are registered. And then it also provides that if the registration has been granted you subsequently and your earlier year's assessments are pending with the assessing officer, and the objects of the trust in those years and the year when the registration is granted is the same, and your registration has never been refused or cancelled in earlier opinion, then this registration will operate retrospectively. Now, there is a condition of registration now which has been changed in a wholesale manner by the Finance Act 2020. Now, under section 12AA, earlier these trusts used to be registered, but now a new registration scheme has been envisaged under the Finance Act, under the new regime of Finance Act 2020. So all registered trusts, whether they are registered under 12A or 12AA, now will have to apply for re-registration within 3 months from the date of coming this section into effect. And this section has to come into effect from 1st October. So within 3 months, all those trusts and institutions which are registered either under section 12A, 12AA or approved under section 1023C, they will have to go in for re-registration. Or if there is a registration for the purpose of section 80G, then also they will have to go in for re-registration. Though these registrations were for infinite period earlier, but now under the new regime, they will have to go in for re-registration, and that registration will remain effective for 5 years. Because every 5 years, now you are required to get yourself re-registered by undergoing the process of inquiries. The department would be at liberty to examine as to whether you are pursuing the activities, your activities are genuine or not, whether there has not been any change. I mean, all those kind of things. But then initially 5 years period, the assessment and the registration will be granted. You apply within 3 months, and electronically it has to be applied. At this stage, no inquiry will be done in case of the existing registered trust or institutions. Certificate of registration will be issued by the commissioner within 3 months from the end of the month in which the application is received, and it will be given for 5 years and no inquiry will be. Second category is where you are already registered under section 12AB and your registration is going to expire. So when it is going to expire, then you have to apply at least 6 months before it is going to expire, or within 6 months from the date of commencement of the activity. So if where registration, where you are going to, where you are going in for, you are registered under section 12AB and your registration is going to expire, then you have to apply for fresh registration at least before 6 months from the date of expiry, and then the CIT will issue, of course after making inquiries, and what kind of inquiries will be there will come after making inquiry, then will issue you the certificate of registration in case he is satisfied. If he is not satisfied, then he will refuse to grant you, or he would refuse to grant you or renew the registration, and within 6 months from the end of the month in which the application is received. The inquiry will be made with reference to your activities, with reference to the genuineness of the activities of the trust, the compliance of requirements of some other law which are material for the purpose of achieving the objective. He will examine, then he will examine your objects also, and being satisfied, then he would issue the registration certificate. In case he is not satisfied, then of course he will issue the rejection certificate. The third category is where the trust which was provisionally registered under section 12AB, then such trust will have to apply at least within 6 months prior to the expiry, or within 6 months from the commencement of activity. Now the commissioner will issue certificate or may reject it depending upon the nature of inquiry which he undertakes within 6 months from the end of the month in which the application is made. Where you want your registration reoperative under the proviso to section 11(7). You are holding both registrations under section 11 and 12, under section 12AA, or you are approved under section 1023C also, because the proviso which is added by Finance Act 2020 says that your registration under section 12AA will become inoperative. And in case you want that inoperative registration will become operative, then you have to apply. So if you are such kind of trust who has gone in for re-registration or the revival of the registration or re-operation of the registration, then you have to apply at least 6 months prior to the commencement of the assessment year for which you are seeking the registration. And in such situation also, the commissioner will make inquiry on those lines, whether your activities are genuine or not, whether your objects are charitable or not, if you are governed by some other act, whether you have made compliance of that other law which is material for achieving your objective or not. So suppose if you have got some environmental objective, the preservation of forest, so lest you should be violating any environment law. I mean, that is also to be seen. So if you are pursuing some educational, but then you are prohibited to accept any capitation fee, but then you are found to have accepted the capitation fee, then obviously you are violating provisions, may not be under the Income Tax Act, but under that respective law which is applicable on you. So the commissioner will make inquiry even in case of such trusts now which are seeking the reoperation of their registration. Inquiry to be made, and then the commissioner will have to issue certificate within 6 months from the end of the month in which the application is received by. But then if you are a trust who has modified or adopted new sets of objects, and those objects are not in conformity with the registration granted to you, then you have to apply within 30 days from the date of such adoption or modification of the new object. So if you are such a trust, then after your application within 30 days, commissioner will make inquiries. Inquiries will be on those very lines, and then will issue you the certificate or refuse to give certificate within a period of 6 months from the end of the month in which that application is received by. And in any other case, and in all those cases where registrations were pending up to 30th/9/2020, they will be covered in any other case. Now provisional registrations will be given, and they have to apply. In any other case, they have to apply at least 1 month prior to the previous year. This is very strange section. Now suppose if I am registered as a trust now, I can obtain the earliest time I can obtain the registration from 1st April 2021, and I have to apply any time up to 28th of February 2021. So what would happen to the contributions or the donations received by me from today till 31st March 2021? As per this, I am required to pay tax. But then this is something very, very strange. So CIT to issue order in 1 month granting provisional registration for 3 years. Now, as under section 12AA, the registration having been granted could have been cancelled by the commissioner. Similarly, the registration which can be granted by the commissioner under section 12AB can also be cancelled under subsection 4 and subsection 5. When subsequently it is noticed by the commissioner that the activities of the trusts are not genuine and are not being carried out in accordance with the objects of the trust, then after extending the opportunity of hearing, after soliciting and eliciting your defense, then the commissioner can cancel your registration. And the second situation, now which needs your particular attention, is that subsequently it is noticed by the commissioner that the activities of the trusts are being carried out in such a manner which has rendered this trust hit by section 13(1)(c), and because of that section 11 and 12 do not apply, or the trust has not complied with the requirement of any particular law which is applicable. Some adverse order has been passed there, and that adverse order either has not been appealed or it may have been appealed. Some adverse order still persists, and then that has attained finality. So in that situation also, the commissioner can cancel the registration. So similar registration requirements are there for ATG also, except this that this trust who is registered under ATG now is required to upload the statement of the donations received also. Now based upon this statement which has to be uploaded by such a trusts under section ATG in respect of donations received, now the benefit of deduction under section ATG would be allowed to the donors. And in case if some donation given by a particular person is not found place in that statement, then the deduction may not be allowed unless that statement comes to be revised or rectified by that trust. So friends, now I think there are number of questions in the chat box, and I have to finish it by 7 because my son, who is studying in Columbia University, and he's being interviewed by Mr. Vivek Agnihotri, the Bollywood. So I have to be there at the Instagram, and therefore I have to finish it also. So I think that I'll take the questions, and then thereafter then we'll terminate this meeting. And I think it's already 6:15, and the questions also will take some time. So I'll take from Avinash Agrawal ji. Please tell us meaning of religious purpose and 2 case laws that guides on differentiating between charitable purpose and religious purpose. So if religious, so I mean charitable purpose has come to be defined, but the religious purpose has not been defined. So religious purpose, the purpose which is in connection with the professed religion. Suppose you are having temple or you are having Goshala. I mean, those religious symbols like Ram Janambhoomi Nyas Trust, these are the religious trusts. And case laws that guides us. I mean, often I cannot tell you the case laws with difference with charitable and religious, but the religious trusts can undertake charitable activities also, and charitable trusts can also undertake religious activities also. But what is denied, then 80G will not be allowed to such trusts who are religious in nature. Abhishek Maheshwari, if we have taken registration 1023C6 or 12A, then can we claim exemption under section? Yes. Suppose if you are an educational institution existing solely for education and not for profit, and your annual receipts do not exceed ₹1 crore, then you are entitled to claim exemption under section 1023C. 1023C 3AB or 3AD. 3AB is applicable to such institutions which are financed by or substantially financed by government. So even if you are registered under section 1023(6), but then if you are financed by government, then also you can claim exemption. Whether accrued interest should be considered for calculation of total receipts of institution for calculation of substantial finance under section 10. अरे भाई क्या है, मैं ऊपर वाले ले लेता हूँ, ये तो बार बार चेंज हो जाता है. Many business entities for window, अच्छा ये तो 271 डबल AD का था, वो हो गया था. Yes. Unlike in section 43, no exception has been provided for receipts exceeding the prescribed limits made through accounting entries, such as where the seller has also purchased some goods from the same person. Please comment. Settled by book entry. So, if the disalliance could not have been made under section 48(3), had the income been computed under that business for whatever reasons, if it was on account of book entries, there are judicial decisions to this effect. Now those decisions would apply in case of the charitable trusts also. So the department would not agree to begin with, but then you have got a very litigious case at later stage. In FAQ session, we will unmute the mic of members who ask the question one.
Earlier questions you answered, sir. The new questions are like whether accrued interest should be considered for calculation of total receipts of institution or calculation of substantial finance under section 1023C.
No, I mean, kindly let me know.
Yeah.
Accrued interest from whom?
तिवारी जी, गौरव जी का, अभिषेक महेश्वरी जी का आप माइक ऑन करवाना तिवारी जी. And if books of accounts are maintained under cash basis of accounting, then whether accrued interest should be considered for calculating the total receipt.
Hello. You can ask your question.
Hello.
Sir, accrued interest on fixed deposit in bank.
Accrued interest on fixed deposits, and fixed deposit has been held with bank.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So substantially financed more than 50%, substantially financed by the government.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So in case you include this accrued interest, then you are substantially financed or you are not substantially financed?
Sir, if we include accrued interest, then we are substantially financed by the government.
Yeah. And you are following which method of accounting?
So cash basis of accounting.
You are following cash basis of accounting.
Yes, sir.
But according to me, even if you are following cash method of accounting, in order to find out the composition of the financing, now this accrued interest also will have to be taken into account. And in that situation, it exceeds 50%, then you are through.
Okay, sir.
Sir, exemption limit prescribed under 1023C 3I ना शोर आ रहा है बड़ा 3I AD और 1 crore is per SSC और per educational institution. डिस्टर्बेंस आ रही है जरा मनोज जी.
तिवारी जी, अभिषेक भैया का म्यूट कर दीजिए माइक प्लीज.
Yes.
One
Exemption
question.
limit prescribed under section 1023C 3I AD 1 crore is for per SSE or per educational institutions run by such. If you read section 1023C, now it doesn't say qua SSE, it says qua institution, and the Karnataka High Court in one of its decision has taken the view that this exemption of 1 crore, this limit of 1 crore has to be seen qua each institution. We have taken registration under section 1023C6 or 12A, then can we claim, ये तो हो गया था. Then Abhishek.
Rakesh Mittal sir is asking.
Calculation of total. नहीं, either you ask or should I reply from this?
Please sir, please sir.
हाँ. Calculation of ये from Avinash Agrawal ji, please tell us meaning of religious. ये हो गया. Abhishek Maheshwari. We have taken registration under section. ये भी हो गया. Please elaborate substantial finance by government year. We have to check this. We have to check year to year basis. A charitable trust treated by a particular community, created by a particular community, can that trust be said to be religious for a particular caste or community? If you read section 13, there is one explanation, and that explanation is it says that if the trust is for the benefit of scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, women and children, it says a trust or is explanation 2. A trust or institution create a trust for the benefit of scheduled caste, backward classes, scheduled tribes or women and children shall not be deemed to be a trust or institution created or established for the benefit of religious community or caste. So you kindly go through explanation 2 to section 13 and you will find answer to your question. Please elaborate on substantial. In case of utilization of accumulated funds at the end of 5 years, do the trust need to file any other form to intimate to the AO? No, there is no other form to be filed to show the utilization. Rakesh Mittal ji kya keh rahe hain? If a trust have some immovable properties but no annual revenue income, can they make provision of salary every year and claim the application, say after 5 years, when they sell one of their immovable property? Sir, jara Rakesh Mittal ji ko unmute kare. I want to discuss with him.
Tiwari ji, please. Rakesh sir, are you there?
हाँ जी सर.
हाँ मित्तल सर.
जी सर.
हाँ सर, जरा आप क्वेश्चन एक्सप्लेन करेंगे मुझे?
हाँ सर, एक ट्रस्ट है.
हाँ जी.
उनके पास बहुत सारी इमूवेबल प्रॉपर्टी है, बहुत सारी बिल्डिंग्स हैं.
हाँ.
पर वो ट्रस्ट के पास रेवेन्यू इनकम नहीं है, मतलब छोटा मोटा इंटरेस्ट का इनकम आता है.
हाँ.
इज नॉट सफिशिएंट टू पे सैलरी टू देयर स्टाफ. तो वो लोग चाहते हैं कि वो सैलरी को कम ना करें, उनको उतनी ही सैलरी, बिकॉज दे आर एंटिसिपेटिंग कि उनकी कोई न कोई प्रॉपर्टी बेच के उसको आगे चला देंगे उस ट्रस्ट को.
तो देखिए, इवन द एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव एक्सपेंसेस फॉर मेंटेनिंग द प्रॉपर्टी हेल्ड अंडर ट्रस्ट इज आल्सो एन एप्लीकेशन ऑफ इनकम.
यस यस सर.
हाँ, सो इट कैन बी डन.
तो मतलब वो 5 साल बाद मान लीजिए वो प्रॉपर्टी मान लो हर साल वो 10 लाख रुपए की सैलरी प्रोवाइड करते हैं.
हाँ.
और साल बाद एक प्रॉपर्टी 1 करोड़ रुपए में बेच देते हैं. तो वो पुराने पिछले 5 साल के या 10 साल के 80 लाख या 90 लाख रुपए क्लेम कर सकते हैं क्या एज एप्लीकेशन?
अब देखिए, जहां तक बोर्ड का और एक्ट का सवाल है, वहां तो एक्सेसिव एप्लीकेशन और 1 ईयर का कोई प्रोविजन नहीं है, आगे आप कैरी फॉरवर्ड कर सकते हैं. लेकिन सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने सुब्रोज एजुकेशनल सोसाइटी 166 DTR में ये होल्ड किया है. हालांकि फॉर्म नंबर 7 में वो कहीं कॉलम नहीं है, लेकिन यदि आपका एक्सेसिव एप्लीकेशन है बिकॉज देयर इज वेरी मीगर रेवेन्यू इनकम, then such excessive application can be used in subsequent year.
There is no limit for the subsequent year?
Yes, there is no limit, sir.
Okay, sir.
Because sir, उस excessive application को set off करने के बारे में provision नहीं है, तो इसलिए कोई ऐसा time limit होने का कोई प्रश्न ही नहीं है. वो तो by normal rules of interpretations we are interpreting because that is the judge-made law. नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन. 73 कैसे आ रहे थे उसमें? एनी अदर क्वेश्चन?
So,
Ah.
Durgesh sir, I think wants to ask some question.
Ah.
Durgesh Kendall also is raising his hand.
योगेश जी,
नहीं कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं, मेरा कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं।
Okay. So I think all questions has been taken by sir. अनिल गर्ग सर का एक क्वेश्चन था जिसका रिप्लाई सर ने चैट बॉक्स में ही दे दिया था। अनिल गर्ग साहब, सर आपको मैं अनम्यूट करूं?
हाँ करिएगा। हाँ
अनिल सर, तिवारी जी।
Good evening, sir.
हाँ नमस्कार सर।
Sir, I have one more question.
Yes sir.
That whether a charitable trust having the gross receipts exceeding the limit prescribed under Section 44AB is required to get the books of accounts audited under Section 44AB, or it would be sufficient to obtain the report under Section 12A, sir. According to me, since the trust is not carrying out any business, it
Yes.
should not be required to obtain any report under Section 44AB.
Yes. But then you are not, because 44AB would come into existence only when the trust is found carrying on the business.
Yes.
That tax audit report is not required, but under the normal provisions of that act which governs that trust or institution, that you are required to obtain, or under form 10B or what that you are required to.
Sir, I have got one more query. That
Yes, sir.
if supposedly I have sold some assets in a particular year for ₹100, and the cost of acquisition of that asset was ₹60, so there arises a capital gain of ₹40.
Yes,
Now
sir.
my question is that if I have not reinvested the amount in another capital assets, how much I would be required? Whether I would be required to invest only 85% of the capital gain or 85% of the gross receipts? Sir, in my opinion, one should be required to invest 85% of the gross receipts, for the reason that when that trust had acquired the property, then the entire investment had been claimed as the application at that time. So on that analogy, it should be the 85% of the gross value of the assets rather than the capital gain. This is my humble opinion, sir.
Sir, my opinion, is that you have to apply, because Section 11(1) capital A, what does it say? It says that if there is a capital gain on the transfer of capital asset,
Yes.
and you invest whole of the considerations, that then whole of the net consideration, then whole of the capital gain will be deemed to be, or will be
Applied.
treated as applied.
Right, sir.
Right. So, and in case you proportionately invest, then to the extent of that proportion, that will be treated as applied.
Sir, I have not invested any single penny, sir.
So if you have treated that asset as application,
Yes, sir.
and given the present position of law, which is evident from subsection 6 of Section 11, whereby they are saying that they are not intending even to allow you depreciation in respect of such asset which has been treated as applied, then your interpretation is correct. But then for which year you are talking about this?
Sir, for the current year, after coming into existence this
For
law.
the current year, the intention of the legislature is exactly the same which we are talking.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
But then if it is of earlier years, prior to assessment year 15-16, then probably then you could have taken the help of all those decisions, that application is one thing and the utilization is another thing. Any other question?
I think no question left, sir. So thank you so much, sir, for such a wonderful session.
सर की email ID required है लोगों को. Sir is asking for your email.
वो दुर्गेश भाई दे देंगे, दुर्गेश भाई के पास है.
Okay, sir.
या मैं लिख देता हूँ, यहाँ पे लिख देता हूँ मैं लिख देता हूँ. Please hold.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, we received it.
We are very thankful to you for sparing your precious time for us on such important topics, sir. the session is so explained that no too many questions remain to be asked. So with concluding the FAQ session, once again, I am thankful to our speaker, Somil Agrawal ji and Dr. Rakesh Gupta ji for accepting our invitation and enlightened us. I am also thankful to one and all who present here for such a patient hearing. Friends, we are in initial stage of virtual CP meeting of our branch. Being the secretary of Indore branch, I request to all members present in this meeting to please send us your feedback and suggestion on secretary_ICI.org or my WhatsApp number 7566553300.